Hello everyone. In last lecture we have seen about the peptic ulcers. That is, there are two types. That is chronic gastric ulcer and chronic duodenal ulcer. The main differentiating points from of chronic gastric and chronic duodenal ulcers that will summarize once again. It can be asked in exams. Okay. So the chronic gastric ulcer, that occurs mainly when there is normal or when there is hyposecretion of acid, while chronic duodenal ulcer occurs when there is hypersecretion of acid. There are various etiological factors that we have seen in last lecture about the chronic gastric and chronic duodenal ulcers. The clinical features of chronic gastric and chronic duodenal ulcers are the pain that is present in chronic gastric ulcer, that is in epigastrium, and it is immediately or within the 2 hours after food, and it is ameliorated by lying flat and at night, and after vomiting the pain can be relieved. While the pain of chronic duodenal ulcer, it is severe and it comes 2 hours after eating, and the pain will be ameliorated after food. So the differentiating point of chronic gastric and chronic duodenal ulcer is, in chronic gastric ulcer there will be immediately there will be pain, or pain will be within the 2 hours after food, while the pain in chronic duodenal ulcer it starts after 2 hours after eating, and the pain will be relieved by having food. So the patient of chronic gastric ulcer will afraid to eat because of pain. The appetite of that patient is good, but he will afraid to eat because of pain that comes immediately after having food or within the 2 hours after food. But the patient of chronic duodenal ulcer has good appetite and he eats anything. There is vomiting that is very common in chronic gastric ulcer, while vomiting is very rare in chronic duodenal ulcer. There will be some water brush or heartburn may be present. Then hematemesis is most common in chronic gastric ulcer, and it is less common in chronic duodenal ulcer, while the melena, that is blood in stool, that is less common in chronic gastric ulcer and it is most common in chronic duodenal ulcer. Then the weight, the differentiating point is, there is weight loss in chronic gastric ulcer patients. The patient will be thin, weak, and that is because of restricted diet, while the patient of chronic duodenal ulcer eats anything, so there will be no weight loss. Appetite is good, so there will be no weight loss. Okay. And tenderness, when you examine the patient, there will be deep tenderness in middle of the epigastrium in chronic gastric ulcer, while there is deep tenderness in right hypochondriac region in chronic duodenal ulcers patients. Okay, these are the differentiating points of chronic gastric and chronic duodenal ulcers. Now we'll move towards the complications of peptic ulcers. There are various complications that may occur after peptic ulcer. The complications are divided into acute, intermediate, and chronic complications. The acute complications are, first one is perforation, and second one is hemorrhage, that is hematemesis or melena. These are the acute complications. The intermediate complications are residual abscess, and the chronic complications are, there may be stenosis, that is pyloric stenosis, or another entity, that is hourglass contracture or teapot stomach or teapot deformity that may occur. That is under the heading of stenosis. And next one is involvement of neighboring viscera. The neighboring viscera like pancreas that may involve because of penetration into the neighboring viscera like pancreas. That is the chronic complication. And third one is carcinoma, mostly gastric ulcer. Chronic gastric ulcer may become malignant, while chronic duodenal ulcer doesn't become malignant. Okay, so these are the chronic complications: acute, intermediate, and chronic complications. Okay, now we'll move towards the first acute complication, that is perforated peptic ulcer. This perforated peptic ulcer is most common in males than females, that the ratio between the male and female is 8:1. The age group that is affected is 45 to 55 years of age. And mostly this perforated peptic ulcer is on anterior surface of duodenum. That is going to perforate most commonly, and when it is less in anterior surface of stomach near the lesser curvature or pyloric antrum. So when the ulcer is present on the anterior wall of duodenum, it is most commonly perforates, while if the ulcer is present on the posterior surface of stomach, it rarely perforates. The clinical features start with dramatic suddenness, because when there is perforation of ulcer, when the ulcer perforates, the contents of stomach or the contents of duodenum that will be escaped through the perforation into the peritoneal cavity. As the ulcer perforates, the contents of stomach or duodenum escape through the perforation into the peritoneal cavity, and as the content of stomach or duodenum that enters into the peritoneal cavity, there will be peritoneal irritation, that is called as peritonism. Okay, when there is peritoneal irritation, the patient cries with agony, so there will be severe pain at that when the food or the content of duodenum or stomach enters into the peritoneum. There will be severe pain that patient will have. So the peritoneum then reacts by secreting copious amount of fluid, and that will relieve the pain. So when there is peritoneal irritation, there will be the peritoneum will react to that is by secreting copious amount of fluid, and that because of that copious amount of fluid, the pain is relieved for a while, and this stage will last for 3 to 6 hours, and it is then followed by bacterial peritonitis. Okay, that's why it is called as the clinical features of that patient will start with dramatic suddenness, because as there is perforation of ulcer, as the ulcer perforates, the content of stomach or duodenum will escape into the peritoneal cavity, and therefore there will be peritoneal irritation, and that peritoneal irritation will cause severe pain. And as every action has some reaction, so peritoneum will react by secreting copious amount of fluid, which thereby relieves the symptoms, that is the pain will be relieved, and this stage will last for 3 to 6 hours, and this is followed by afterwards this is followed by bacterial peritonitis. Okay, now the clinical features are, there will be first there will be massive perforation. In massive perforation, there will be, when there is massive perforation, the patient will be pale, he will be anxious, then he will be hard to move, the temperature is subnormal, but the pulse rate will be increased and it may be 80 to 90 per minute. There will be no movements of abdominal wall with respiration. Normally there will be abdominal wall movements with respiration, but when there is massive perforation, there will be the movements of abdominal wall will be lost, that occurs with respiration. The abdomen become tender with board like rigidity will be there. There will be dullness on percussion. On per rectal examination, there will be tenderness. So these are the clinical features when there is massive perforation. So in massive perforation, once again I will repeat, a patient is pale, he is anxious, he is hard to move, temperature is subnormal, the pulse will be increased about 80 to 90 per minute, no movements of abdominal wall with respiration, there will be tenderness and board like rigidity, and when you percuss there will be dullness, and on per rectal examination there will be pelvic tenderness. Then after 3 to 6 hours, so these are the clinical features as soon as the perforation occurs, and after 3 to 6 hours the pain and tenderness and rigidity will be decreased, and the temperature may rises to normal or it may become higher. The pulse will be high, the bowel sounds are absent, and there will be temporary relief, that is called as period of illusion. As we have seen, when there is peritoneal irritation, all the above symptoms, that is patient becomes pale, anxious, he will be hard to move, the temperature may be subnormal but the pulse rate will be high, and there will be no movements of abdominal wall. That will be these symptoms will occur when there is perforation, and after 3 to 6 hours when there is peritoneal reaction, that means it secretes peritoneal fluid, copious amount of peritoneal fluid, then the pain, the tenderness, that may be relieved, the rigidity will be decreased, and the pain, but the temperature will rises to normal or it may become higher because of bacterial peritonitis. The pulse will be high, then there will be, this is called as temporary relief, that is period of illusion, and then after 6 hours there will be diffuse peritonitis and there will be abdominal distension, as there is increased or there will be copious amount of fluid because of peritoneal reaction, the abdomen also get distended. And the pulse rate is also increased. Then there may be subacute perforation where there is pain is less severe, it is less generalized with tenderness, the bowel sounds are present, and there is fluid in paracolic gutter, there is pain and tenderness in right iliac fossa. So this is perforated peptic ulcers, the clinical features. The treatment for perforated peptic ulcer is a surgical treatment, that is you have to do laparotomy, and perforation is closed with interrupted sutures, and that is done with omental patch from omentum is taken, and with the interrupted suture the perforation is closed, and afterwards the peritoneal toilet, that is peritoneal washing, is done. Okay, this is all about the perforated peptic ulcer. The next one is hematemesis. It is another acute complication of peptic ulcers. Hematemesis is blood in vomiting. Okay, the etiological factors, there are various etiological factors of hematemesis. Like first one is peptic ulcer, then multiple erosions in the stomach, then esophageal varices. Esophageal varices are dilatation and tortuosity in the esophageal veins at the lower end of esophagus. Then CA stomach may also cause hematemesis. Then there is one syndrome, that is Mallory-Weiss syndrome. Then Meckel's diverticulum, hemophilia, pernicious anemia, and purpura. These are the various causes of hematemesis. But the most common cause of hematemesis is chronic peptic ulcers. Most common cause is chronic peptic ulcers. About 65% of cases the hematemesis is because of chronic peptic ulcer, while other remaining that is 30% is because of acute peptic ulcers, and others causes are about 5%, that is esophageal varices, multiple erosions, or CA stomach, or Mallory-Weiss syndrome, or Meckel's diverticulum, hemophilia, pernicious anemia, and purpura. These are about 5%. Okay, so most common cause of hematemesis is chronic peptic ulcer. So in chronic, when the patient is having peptic ulcers which is chronic, there the slight bleeding may occur due to trauma from solid food, because of solid food, and that may cause trauma to the ulceration, and that will cause slight bleeding that may occur, and that traces of blood can be detected on gastric analysis or as occult blood in stool. In old people with atherosclerosis, the risk increases because of large vessels. And because due to erosion of artery at the base of ulcer because of atherosclerosis. Then acute peptic ulcers. Next one is acute peptic ulcers. It can be detected on gastroscopy. It may be single acute peptic ulcer, or there may be multiple erosions may be present in the stomach, and this is diagnosed by gastroscopy. Then another cause of hematemesis is Mallory-Weiss syndrome. It is common in males below 50 years of age. It is when there is in Mallory-Weiss syndrome there is prolonged vomiting. Bouts of prolonged vomiting will be there after, most commonly often after alcohol. Then there will be vomiting of gastric content. suddenly starts to vomit blood profusely and persistently because of straining and retching. Then there will be longitudinal tear of mucosa just below the cardia, and there will be sudden onset of hematemesis. So what happens in Mallory-Weiss syndrome? It is common in males, and it is when there are prolonged vomiting, and it is most commonly after having alcohol. There will be vomiting of gastric contents, and suddenly patient starts to vomit blood profusely and persistently, and that is because of straining and retching. There will be longitudinal tear of mucosa just below the cardia, and there will be sudden onset of hematemesis because of tear of the mucosa just below the cardia. This is also seen in migraine and vertigo, and the diagnosis is done by history and by gastroscopy. The clinical features of Mallory-Weiss syndrome, clinical features of hematemesis are: there will be faintness, there will be swelling and pallor. Patient may collapse occasionally. Then there will be hematemesis, which is effortless. There will be coffee ground or bright red colored vomiting. Later on, it may become black and tarry stool, that is melena, that is blood in stool. Or red and clotted blood may be passed on per rectal examination. So the clinical features are: there will be faintness, there will be sweating, pallor, patient may collapse occasionally, and the hematemesis, that is the vomiting is effortless, and there will be coffee ground or bright red colored vomiting. Later on, it becomes black and tarry stool, and red clotted blood will be present on per rectal examination. The treatment for hematemesis is: the collapsed patient should be laid flat, the foot end should be raised. Then if the patient is restless, you have to give morphine 15 milligram IV, that is intravenous injectable, 4 hourly. Then plasma expanders such as Hemaxil can be given. Then you have to monitor the patient, the BP, pulse rate, CVP, urine output monitoring should be done, and if required, you have to advise the patient for BT, that is blood transfusion. And also IVH2 receptor antagonist can be given. So this is the patient. Whenever a patient comes to you, when the patient is collapsed, you have to lay him flat, the foot end should be raised. If he is restless, then you have to give morphine 15 milligram IV 4 hourly, and plasma expander can be given, that is Hemaxil, and you have to monitor the patient's BP, pulse rate, CVP, respiratory rate, urinary output, etc. And afterwards, blood transfusion can be advised according to the condition of the patient. Next we'll move towards the chronic complications of peptic ulcers. So the chronic complications are pyloric stenosis, hourglass contracture, teapot stomach or teapot deformity. So first one is pyloric stenosis. In the pyloric stenosis results, it is the result of cicatrization from the duodenal or juxtapyloric ulcer. There will be cicatrization of that duodenal or juxtapyloric ulcer, and may be due to carcinoma that is situated at or near the pylorus, that may cause pyloric stenosis. And the clinical features of pyloric stenosis are pain and fullness that will increase towards the evening. There will be vomiting with large, foul, frothy vomitus, and usually it is once a day, mostly in the evening. On examination, if you examine the patient in thin and weak subjects, there will be outline of enlarged stomach can be observed, and there will be visible peristalsis also. Peristalsis may be visible in thin, weak, emaciated persons. The treatment for pyloric stenosis is again pyloroplasty. The next complication is hourglass stomach. Most commonly it is seen in women's, and the cause of hourglass stomach is cicatricial contracture around a saddle shaped laser curve ulcer. If the ulcer is present on the laser curvature, then it may be most commonly seen when the ulcer is present at that site, that is the contracture around the saddle shaped laser curve. When the ulcer is present on the saddle shaped laser curve, in extreme cases the stomach will divide into two compartments united by a channel, and it is associated with pyloric stenosis. The clinical features of hourglass contracture or hourglass stomach is periodicity is lost. There will be vomiting that is frequent. It doesn't give any relief to the discomfort. The appetite of the patient is poor, and that's why the weight loss is more. Investigations you have to do is barium meal and gastroscopy, and the treatment for hourglass stomach is Billrod 2 gastrectomy. You have to do gastrectomy. Okay. Then third complication is teapot stomach. And next one is the intermediate complication like the second complication from chronic peptic ulcer, that is penetration. The chronic complications are, first one is stenosis, that includes pyloric stenosis, teapot deformity, and hourglass contracture. Then next one is penetration into neighboring viscera, that is most commonly the pancreas are involved, that is penetration into the neighboring viscera. And last one is malignancy. The most commonly the chronic gastric ulcer may become malignant, and chronic duodenal ulcer will not turn into malignancy. There will be no cancer that is seen in chronic duodenal ulcer. And the chronic gastric ulcer, there are chances of about 0.5% chances that may become malignant. So this is all about the various complications of peptic ulcers. The short note can be asked on the perforated peptic ulcer, or it can be the question may ask for the on hematemesis, or 10 marks question may be asked on perforated peptic ulcer and hematemesis, and 2 marks question for hourglass contracture or hourglass stomach or teapot stomach, or for it can be asked pyloric stenosis can be asked for as a 2 mark question or short note. So the homework for today is you have to write all the complications of peptic ulcers and send me by tomorrow 5 p.m. Okay, today we'll stop here. Thank you.